joined now by Tim Verghese from Inside Nebraska. What's up, Tim?
Come on, guys.
Listen, not much happening this week. Geez, Nebraska's interesting, right? It's almost like they can go 0 to 6. It can be kind of silent, nothing. We're not hearing much to. Oh shoot, they're getting. We saw it with Spindler. Pritchett probably was more of a faster, quicker burn. We've seen it now with Trae. We're seeing it with Marty. It's apparently a lot happens behind the scenes, Tim, that we're not privy to because they get to where they're moving in a hurry.
They move fast.
So let's start with Trae. That's one I know that people are super excited about. Obviously, the announcement or the commitment announcement date is coming up here in a little less than a week now, and he's planning to be back or is already back in Lincoln. I mean, I don't do this professionally. That seems like a good sign for the Huskers, though.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, writing's on the wall at this point. You feel pretty good about, where Nebraska stands kind of heading into this backstretch. And like we say on the flip side of things do move fast and I could still see LSU make a run here at the very end, but I kind of have to believe just what I was hearing leading up to this week and then now, him deciding to come back only bodes well for Nebraska, especially with the group of 27 guys they've got coming in around Taylor this weekend. Yeah, I think he's going to have his peer recruiting hat on this weekend.
Yeah, so, I'm just kind of watching him work, and I pit it against Latif's development, kind of what Dylan is already doing progressively. You've got Dayton in the fold. What is it about how they're doing their recruiting or the due diligence in their recruiting that you think allows them to kind of stockpile?
It comes down to Dylan.
It just doesn't happen with quarterbacks,
right? And
unless
that's
you're
the
Ole
thing.
Miss.
Right. But that's the thing. When you get a guy like a guy like a Dylan, it gives you a little freedom to move around and operate a little bit. And it also gives a lot of these top quarterbacks a reason to look at you. So they say, like, hey, Dylan thought this was good enough. Why is that? And so all of a sudden increase grows. Like Nebraska already had Dylan in the fold when they started pushing for TJ last January. And it was pretty early on into talking to TJ that Nebraska kind of emerged as a favorite. They were able to get that done. They got Dayton done in the fall, and now they're looking ahead to 27 and, talking to people in the program. If it's not Taylor next week, I think they're going to get their guy this summer regardless. I think they want that 27 guy in the boat early because after getting Dylan and after seeing how the sport is evolving and shifting and the importance of the position, but two, the importance of it in a recruiting cycle, they didn't get the benefit of Dylan, the peer recruiter, to build out that 24 class a couple cycles ago. They want the benefit of Trae Taylor, the peer recruiter, as they're building out this current class or this 27 class. And if it's not Taylor, it's going to be one of these top 27 arms that they're in on. And I think they're going to get a pretty good one, even if it's not Taylor. And that's just kind of where things are. Is now the dominoes are falling faster, so they're forced to speed up their process. But as a result of having Dylan, they can kind of be a little picky and also go in on, hey, we're going in on Trae Taylor, number 4 quarterback in the country, and we're going to go up against ACC powers, and we think we can win. And, right, so far, we have no reason to believe they won't win.
So we've seen that progress with quarterbacks. Obviously, Latif had his own accolades coming out. Trae Taylor is probably closer in terms of stature to Dylan than any of the other two guys they brought in. But do you see that start to happening at any other position groups as well, where Nebraska's starting to get sort of maybe a little bit of the benefit of the doubt or a little bit momentum as guys like, I don't know, like a Ja'Cory Barney kind of has a nice first year in Nebraska, or like a Vincent Shavers or Willis McGahee start to play roles at Nebraska as well?
I think it's going to take another year or so for wide receiver to get there. I think there's a very good chance if wide receiver gets there after this year if Dane Key does what I think he's going to do and Ja'Cory, keeps being Ja'Cory. But I think DB recruiting is one that just not even because of anything, any one particular name. It's just a combination of John Butler's experience and Addison Williams' experience and their ability as recruiters. But that's been a position where Nebraska's been able to kind of go and take on a Georgia and take on a Florida and take on, some of these programs that do have a tradition producing defensive backs, and they can challenge, guys committed there or guys considering there, and be a real player in those type of recruitments. DB is one that I think has been a little interesting for me this cycle to see just how aggressive Nebraska's been and how receptive some of these top DBs have been to Nebraska.
Yeah, it's interesting. I like the way that they're kind of moving, and just in watching practices and stuff, how fluid and kind of piecemealing and mixing and matching has been. I think if you're a defensive back and you're watching practice or you get a vibe of their style, I think you can clearly see how they're open to moving chess pieces to get the best matchups, right? They're not set on any one five-some or six-some or four-some. Like, they'll do what they have to do as cross trainers.
For sure. And this is not necessarily not a slight at all at Evan Cooper, the last DB coach, but it feels like part of it is just having a defensive coordinator that is a DB's guy, having Phil Snow in the building, and having Addison Williams, 3 defensive, and Adam DiMichele, like 4 guys in the defensive staff that are DB focused. When they talk, there was a lot of talk under Cooper about, hey, we're getting positionless DBs, like we're cross training all our DBs. It feels like there's a plan, like more of a plan now, where it's like, hey, it's not just like I'm going to come in and be cross-trained and then eventually figure it out. It's like, oh no, they want me specifically at nickel, but they're going to train me at everything and then figure out where I'm good at. No, they want me specifically at safety, and there's like there's already a clear vision of what they want all these guys to be, and it allows them to be a little pickier in how they build out the sport too. Like if you notice and look at the 26 DBs thereafter, the board's much smaller than it has been in previous cycles at the position.
Yeah.
Tim, as you kind of look at some of the other positions, I know I keep thinking about offensive line, right? Because obviously they were in for a while on David Sanders in last year's class, and it didn't end up going their way. No, they were in for a while on Jackson Cantwell. It doesn't look like that's obviously not going their way now either. Like, as we kind of focus on the trenches and building out through there, how have you seen those areas start to progress through the first couple of years of this Matt Rhule era? And have you seen the needle move at all with Terry Braden getting into the fold on the defensive line side?
Yeah, on O-line, it's coming together in the sense that I do think Donovan Raiola is doing a better job of getting aggressive, getting into these top recruitments early on, and that's I mean that's what hurt them in the David Sanders recruitment was the longevity. But now you look ahead to 27 with some of these top offensive tackles. I mean they've gotten like 6 or 7 of the top 10 offensive tackles in the country on campus this spring. Like they've gotten a good number of the top, and they're going to get another one on campus this weekend. And in Kelsey Adams out of Georgia, and so they're doing a better job of recognizing what it takes to win these elite offensive line recruitments. And on the flip side, they're doing a good job of finding value where they can, um, landing these high floor pieces or these developmental pieces that they can work, finding the wins where they can get them. No one expected them to get Juju Marks this last cycle. They went out and pulled that off thanks to Jamar Mosey. And, that's a guy that they can continue to develop. You look at this 26 class, I mean, they're in it for Kelvin Obot. They're in it for, Claude Puma, 2 of the top offensive tackles in the country. They kind of need to land one of those guys, in my opinion. I don't think it's like I can't foresee at this point with either recruitment how it's going to shake out. I know there's ground to be made up with Obot, but I think
don't think Nebraska hasn't been in Idaho though. Like it's better. I think it's better than we think.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they've invested a good amount of resources into that recruitment, and I mean, the thing about Obot is that was a guy that blew up kind of as a junior, and Nebraska was in on him pretty early. Like Nebraska had him on campus in early November, I believe, and kept him on campus for multiple days and let him know that he was a priority. Like it's Nebraska's further entrenched than some of the programs in that recruitment, and that may ultimately benefit them on the back end of it. But yeah, I mean, that's where we're at right now with O-line is I think, especially on the interior, Donovan Raiola has done a really good job. The tackle spot's one of those things where you just kind of have to hit in recruiting. And so far, he's kind of worked in and landed the guys he can, but he's starting to realize, I think that light's starting to turn on for the whole staff and realizing what it takes to land elite offensive linemen. The next step is just producing and getting some of these, turning some of these guys into draft picks and being able to show like a tradition and an opportunity to get developed at Nebraska.
So what's funny is Obot. You bring him up, and that's one of about I don't know. Sometimes I think he does keep receipts, but Obot is a prime example of those guys because he talks about it in his pressers all the time that he trusts their talent evaluation. And he had the brilliant one where he said, "Well, Ohio State gets a guy into their camp early, and it's like, oh, he's a good player." It's like we get a guy into our camp early, and everybody waits to offer it until after we do. Like we trust our ability to evaluate guys. I mean, Obats, he speaks perfectly to that because he almost came from nowhere, but when Nebraska first offered.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's going to be when we look back on this 26 class, if they put together the class, I think they can. We're going to look back on multiple of these guys. It's like, oh man, Nebraska was there before anybody else. Like that with him. I mean, with CJ Brona, who's in the class currently. Like that was one of those where he committed, and people were like, oh, this was the one you were hyping up, Tim. Like I remember because like I posted something ahead of the announcement, like, hey, something's coming, and then people were like, oh, this is where you're hyping up like a nose. I was like, watch the tape. He had 6 interceptions as like a junior in like 6 games. Like he runs 10-1 in the 100 meter. Like this is a dude. And now you're seeing the recruitment taking off to the point where people are now like, oh, I don't know if Nebraska's gonna be able to hold on. Why is he still committed? And it's like I think it says something that he's still committed despite all these other schools pursuing. The fact that he has all these other OVs scheduled, it says something that Nebraska's been able to hold on to his commitment, that he's not made the decision to reopen and kind of explore his options while keeping Nebraska. I think the fact that he's holding on to this pledge tells me Nebraska's pushing some right buttons to this day.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we undervalue. You talk about the longevity of the relationship, but I think a lot of these guys. I think we saw it with Michael Terry last year, right? Where when Nebraska gets in on a guy before everybody else does and before their recruitment blows up, it does feel like it kind of engenders a sense of loyalty to at least the idea of Nebraska. Even if they don't end up making the commitment, it seems like it does create a lot of goodwill for the program.
Yeah, and that's what you need again in the transfer portal era. That's what you're trying to do. Like you're trying to create goodwill. You're just trying to be like, hey, listen, even if this doesn't go our way, no feelings hurt, no hard feelings. Like go, like maybe we'll find our way back to each other. And Nebraska's done a really good job of making these early impressions and sticking with them. They're not early to everybody, of course. There's some recruitments they've been late on. There's some recruitments that it's like, okay, why are we offering at this point? This recruitment's practically over. But they typically do a good job of finding the guys they want pretty early, identifying them, and sticking to their guns.
So there's got to be, Tim. Do you think? Let's go local here, just on the heels of what you just said about like where they are in the pecking order of the offer, and let's not talk whether they're late or early. Let's just generally speaking, so we don't frame the question. But from a Sharmar Brown hitting the portal. He's still the only portal guy that's been on campus for a visit, which I think is pretty impressive in terms of what I would say is doing their due diligence. Or you compare it to a guy like Darian Jones, who some may say, hey, Nebraska was here in the pecking order in terms of them offering. Where do you fall on the sword when it comes to using the term either due diligence or doing their homework or making sure that they get it right when you're trying to slot when and how they approach their recruiting process?
I think when it's Nebraska and we know the staff to this point to be transparent and they are transparent, I don't mind. And that's the when people talk about in-state recruiting and they complain, and specifically when they complain about in-state recruiting and how the staff is ignoring in-state recruits or whatever, what that whole conversation ignores is this staff has done a fantastic job of reaching out to these programs, these coaches, and these players and these parents, and letting them know exactly where they stand. There's a transparency on the situation. Darian Jones wasn't affected by the fact that Nebraska was quote unquote late to offer him. He wasn't, he understood, recognized the situation, like Nebraska laid it out like, hey, here's where we're at with our DB board. Here's where you stand. Here's what we need to see. Here's how you can earn an offer. And, went back, did those things and got the offer, and it wasn't like he did those things. It was just, there was new information Nebraska wasn't privy to. They got exposed to that information. They were like, oh, okay, well, he checks off the boxes we needed him to check off. Let's go ahead and offer. We have no real questions there. We're sure there. And with Jamar Brown, it's like hey, like, we are comfortable with our running back depth. Like, we weren't lying a couple of weeks ago when Matt Rhule said, I have no concerns with running back. He wasn't lying when he said that. And so, but they still do their due diligence on a local talented running back that entered the portal. And then they realized pretty quickly that the market is a lot more competitive than what they thought it was, or initially thought it was. And when you look at that recruitment and you say, okay, well, what can we add to this offense? How do we make this program better? This is a guy that can make the program better. He's not just a depth piece at back. And so they've decided to press the accelerate button on this recruitment, and they have him on campus, and now are a legit contender in this mix compared to with these other three programs. Will they land him? We'll see. Like Matt Rhule said, desperate teams set the market. There are a couple of desperate teams in this recruitment that need running backs. And so I don't think it really matters when. I think it matters when you offer, because, like, a high school recruit, because that stuff sticks. But with local guys, and specifically with transfer portal guys, the timing of the offer doesn't matter as long as you're transparent about the situation. And Nebraska's done a really good job of staying transparent for the most part with in-state guys.
We're talking with Tim Verghese, Inside Nebraska. So, Tim, I do think it's interesting, from a lot of people on the outside, how can we tell whether or not, hey, Nebraska's maybe being patient on this guy, doing some due diligence, versus maybe they're not that interested? Like, is that something we can even, just from the outside, how are you able to determine that? Just, I think it's really hard to sit here, and because I think the Darian Jones is a great example, where you sit here and you go, oh man, Iowa offered before Nebraska? That's kind of weird. And then all of a sudden Nebraska gets an offer and you think, oh, well, they panicked because Iowa offered or whatever. And that's not really how the staff operates, but it's hard to see all the details from the outside,
And we've seen them not do it. Like we didn't, like with Tamala or Amarion, where they're not.
The offer never comes.
Yeah, like they're not. I don't think they panic offer, but I also think in the same vein, though, TV guys that say yes to other schools regionally shouldn't be looked at like, well, we thumbed their nose at them because Nebraska didn't offer. Like, the piece we're missing, and it annoys me. And I know people think I go out of my way to defend Amarian Jackson, but what I'm saying with recruitments like that is Nebraska. Ravi said this to me earlier, Tim, and I think he's kind of right. Their approach and the level of security they have in their eval comes across like a team that wins 9, 10, 11 games every year. They haven't yet. So I think we let that creep into our forefront that I don't know.
It makes us insecure.
Yeah, like we're insecure about their recruiting process. But in the same vein, I'm not going to knock AJ for not fawning over Nebraska if he doesn't see the attention that he's getting from them either. Like, he's good enough on his own merit to go do his own thing without needing the homeschool bump. I think we should embrace that as opposed to pitting one against the other, because it used to be a death sentence if Nebraska didn't offer. And then we would say, well, what's wrong with this kid? It's not like that anymore, and I think we should celebrate that as if you want the best for kids coming out of this state.
It's certainly a win for high school football players.
You know what I mean?
Like, yeah, absolutely.
They're just not mature enough to have that nuanced conversation. It drives me crazy.
Yeah. No, but I agree with all of that. Like from the again, the way the staff evaluates and the confidence they have is, like, they probably, like, you can probably do that when you and have the fan base's trust when you are winning 9, 10 games or whatever. But yeah, on the flip side, like you mentioned, like, it's just it's a tough conversation to have with people because like there's the kind of the maturity there of like, hey, this is a good thing for in-state recruiting. Like, like outside school, like Missouri and Iowa State, they don't need Nebraska's validation anymore.
Mhm.
Like they are comfortable going into the state and being like, oh, when I go into Nebraska, I'm going to get a good football player. It's not like there's something wrong with it. Like there's like you mentioned, like they're comfortable coming into the state. We saw it last cycle with Kansas. Kansas went in and offered some guys and tried to pull some guys out of the state. Iowa State's doing it this cycle. And I think just again, like part of this is also just the reality of college football hasn't really set in for some people that there's a separation within these Power Four conferences of the top two programs and the bottom two conferences in the Power Four. And there's still, at the same time, it still is a big deal to go Power Four. It's still a big deal to like have
It's
the
hard. I don't
Yeah.
thumb my nose at any. It's hard.
Absolutely.
It's
Yeah.
hard. Guys leave Purdue. You know what I mean? So it is hard to win at this level in Power Four football, and it's hard to be a good player too. So I don't knock. I think it's good for everybody. I really do.
Right.
It's got to up their game and be good at their evals.
Mhm.
And in the same vein, I am happy that other schools don't need Nebraska's blessing because that only hurts the kids being recruited, right?
Yeah.
Because there's just really good players.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's only going to keep growing. I mean, again, like we're going to have the same conversation next year with Torrey Pittman and Matt Erickson and and that 27 class. And I'm sure we're going to see some more guys rise to the talent. I feel like the talent in the Metro is only continuing to increase. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. And like, again, like I think all of these conversations are funny here because obviously the local focus here. It's like, again, like when I was covering A&M or Michigan, and those states do consistently, obviously Texas is a different level, but it's the same thing down there. It's like, oh, like A&M will freak out every cycle when there's a guy that goes to a school where, a lot of Aggies go to and he doesn't go to A&M. And it's like, yeah, you win some, you lose some. Like, but at a school like that, like A&M, it's like, oh, you eventually get over it because it's every year you're going to miss out on some in-state guys. We're just going to have to kind of get used to the fact that Nebraska is producing a little more talent than they have in years past. These guys are Power Four ready. They just may not be. We're recruiting like a Big Ten contender. We need this level of athlete. They may not be that level of standard, but that's a very high standard. There are 150 guys in a recruiting class that fit that standard.
That's our guy, Tim Verghese, Inside Nebraska. Great stuff, Tim. Appreciate it as always. Enjoy your weekend.
Thanks,
Sir,
Steve.
appreciate y'all.
All right, buddy.